election in even-numbered years. U.S. Congressional Representative is a partisan office. Candidates may declare a party affiliation. Candidates for representative from Congressional District 8 this year are Keith Arnold, Carmen Goers, Kim Schreier, and Imraan Siddiqi. Kim Schreier and Carmen Goers are not participating in this forum. It's the policy of the League to be nonpartisan. Therefore, we neither endorse nor oppose candidates or parties. The rules for participation in this forum were sent ahead of time to all candidates, and they've agreed to follow them, and I will enforce them. I'll pose the questions, clearly state the amount of time allowed for each answer. We're using a countdown timer visible to all candidates. Time limits on answers to the questions will be strictly enforced. The order of responses for the first question will be Imraan Siddiqi, followed by Keith Arnold. I will alternate candidates in the starting position to ensure a fair sequence, with Mr. Arnold leading off on the second question, Mr. Siddiqi on the third, and so forth. With that, let's begin. Candidates will have 90 seconds to respond to this first and every following question. Mr. Siddiqi, this first question is, what are the major issues you feel need to be addressed by the House of Representatives? Please explain why you'd be focusing on these particular issues.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Honored to be here with you all, and thank you for putting together this forum. The two top main issues that I wanted to focus on in terms of on a federal level that encompasses quite a few different things within our region. That's housing, affordable housing, access to affordable healthcare, and access to affordable education. So in income inequality, we live in a district where we see a very pronounced amount of division and growing chasm between the highest earners within society and those who are, the middle and working class. The middle class is shrinking. So these are all things that I feel as though our tax dollars need to be focused on addressing. People are being driven out of their homes. Healthcare emergencies are causing people to be bankrupted and causing major life emergencies, and oftentimes having to reconstitute their lives in other states because of these issues. And I have a son starting college this fall, so the rising cost of education are all things that need to be addressed on a federal level. Secondarily, I would like to talk about an issue that's really plaguing our political system right now, and that is the influence of dark money in our political system. So you've seen in many primaries on a federal level the rise of money being spent by corporate and foreign interests. So definitely needs to be addressed because that's a threat to our democracy.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the response, Mr. Siddiqi. Mr. Arnold, your thoughts?
Okay. My connection is having a lot of problems, so I'll try to be brief. My main concern is ranked choice voting. That would give office holders a chance to make a decision and not have to worry about being targeted and removed from office by plants from the opposition. That would allow the opposition to take over the office with less than half to vote on the side. Most important part is to prevent the judiciary from changing the laws. They're an active fact.
Mr. Arnold, we're having
They do not
considerable.
have the ability to use laws, and that must be enforced. Excuse me?
We're having considerable difficulty hearing what you're saying. Might you keep turning off your camera?
I can't. Okay. How's that?
Well, let's see if it works better. Take another. Oh, she stopped the timer. Great job. Thank you. So go ahead and finish up your thoughts.
Okay, I said my main issues is ranked choice voting to prevent opponents from taking over the office with less than half the vote by putting in plans to delete your support and not allow the court's fact they did not have lawmaking power. So when they try to make laws, they should be impeached. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. And you're up first on this next question. Again, 90 seconds if you choose to use it. What qualifications and experience make you a good choice to address these issues? Mr. Arnold.
Yes, I can't hear. I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry too. Let me try again. What qualifications and experience make you a good choice to address these issues?
My is just consistently running for the office and developing the ideals. I am a dedicated citizen. I've always been active. I always vote. I've just been trying hard to fight for justice. Thank you. Hopefully that all got in.
You're very welcome. Mr. Siddiqi.
Yes, I have a pretty extensive experience in terms of my small business ownership background. So I have worked as a small business owner, so I definitely understand the struggles that many in our society go through in terms of, struggling to pay the rent or struggling to pay employees and providing those benefits. So I feel I can relate to those experiences. Furthermore, I've been a community leader who stood for all marginalized communities within our state. And prior to living in the state of Washington, I lived in Arizona. I've been a civil rights leader. I've stood up against some of the worst policies and structural bigotry that have existed in our society. And even when things have not necessarily been popular within society, I've been able to stand strong and take strong stances during these time frames. So coming from this intersectional background where I've stood for so many different communities. I'm part of the board of directors of the Washington Community Alliance. I'm part of the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network. And so these experiences help me relate to the vast array of communities that exist in our state and the growing diversity that exists in our state. I take a very practical approach in terms of being very individual based and try to hear and be empathetic to individuals' concern, no matter what your political background. So I feel like this can make me a great candidate for this office.
Thank you, sir. The next question is this, Mr. Siddiqi, you'll lead off on this. If elected, what would be your funding priorities?
Yeah, I feel like our country is, over the course of the past 3 decades, we've spent quite a bit of our budget on sending bombs overseas to bomb various countries. So I feel like the current sort of, you know, model of just continuously sending bombs overseas for certain areas is a waste of our tax dollars. And I'd like to see our tax dollars be spent here at home on infrastructure. We talk about how can we utilize federal dollars to grow our housing here? We have a major housing issue in many of the areas across District 8. You go through the east side, you go through places like Kent and Auburn, and many of the places, Leavenworth, all have housing crises. So we want to, on a federal level, reallocate those tax dollars here within our district. Like I said, I would spend a much greater amount of money on more holistic and more accessible healthcare for our system. Working in a nonprofit through the pandemic, I saw how healthcare inequity impacts so many different communities. So we need a Medicare for all option that will be allow for our communities to access healthcare as a human right. So I'll definitely prioritize the funding for these human rights in our areas.
Thank you, Mr. Siddiqi. Mr. Arnold, funding priorities?
Could you repeat the question? I didn't quite hear all of it.
Yes, I'd be
Hello?
happy to. I'd be happy to. If elected, what would be your funding priorities?
Funding priorities, bringing good jobs, living wages for everyone, and enforcing employment laws to make sure that employers treat their employees properly.
Anything further, sir? Okay,
Oh,
Mr.
okay,
Arnold.
I think better stop there.
Okay, thank you.
See, notice.
Thank you. So the next question for you, Mr. Arnold, to go first on is, what, if any, environmental legislation or regulation is a priority for you?
Policy is agreeing to put the environment first, fight global warming, make sure we're doing what is necessary to provide a safe environment, renewable sources of energy, and clean energy. So basically, just putting the environment first because this is the only planet we have to live on. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Mr. Siddiqi?
Yes, definitely concerned about the environment. I support the concepts of the Green New Deal, so I would be a vocal supporter of these legislations when I'm in Congress. I moved to Washington in 2020 in Sammamish, and the first summer that I experienced there, the temperature went up to 106 degrees, and I lived in a house without air conditioning. So we're seeing very directly the impacts of global warming on our region, and that has to be addressed at a very high level. Part of what I've touched on is accountability. Accountability is an operative term that I'm going to use over and over again because you see the impacts of the major corporations that are polluting our society right now, whether it's big oil companies, whether it's fracking companies. So holding those types of companies accountable, making sure that there's continuous regulations that are being placed on them, offshore drilling as well, limiting that access as well. And in places that I've lived before, also being on the cutting edge and understanding where things are going awry. So you have governments like Saudi Arabia, for example, buying up farmland in states like Arizona and Colorado and draining the water table in some of these areas. So now you're seeing foreign governments in order to exacerbate their cattle farming, growing alfalfa and draining the water table and exploiting our environment. So I will be a very strong voice against any foreign entities trying to destroy our environment in places like
Thank
Washington.
you very much, sir. We'll turn our thoughts now to immigration. Thinking about the issue of immigration, Mr. Siddiqui, you'll lead off on this one. What policy recommendations, if any, would you make or support?
Yes, as somebody who has worked directly in immigration, I actually started an immigration law practice with my day job at Care Washington. I have four immigration attorneys that work for me. I've worked directly with, refugees who are seeking asylum in the state. My wife works working alongside refugees. So we need to have an immigration system that is more compassionate, in my opinion. Every country has the right to enforce their borders. However, that right to enforce their borders should not be couched in any type of systemic or structural racism. We see images out of Laredo, Texas, a few years ago with people riding horses with whips, whipping people, trying to come and gain a better life for their families. People don't seek asylum or cross thousands of miles out of a sense of adventure, risking them and their families' lives. So we need to ensure that our border policies and the agencies that are tasked with enforcing these policies are doing so from a more humane perspective. So not having people who have maybe engaged in sort of racist rhetoric as part of these agencies. Also, furthermore, all of these tax dollars in corporations that need to be taxed at a higher level, these are tax dollars that we can spend in building infrastructures in different countries, such as Mexico and Central American countries, where if people are seeking refuge, there might be more additional infrastructure that exists within these countries, or maybe they don't maybe have to come here as much. So I would support that as well.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Arnold, policy recommendations related to immigration?
Hello? Hello? I think I lost you again.
Mr. Arnold, the question is thinking about the issue of immigration, what policy recommendations, if any, would you make or support?
Yes, immigration. Yes, I
Yeah,
think we should enforce current laws, and we should focus on employers who take advantage of the illegally as far. But if you want more people in, you should just raise the amount of people who are allowed to come in, who are allowed to come in legally, not just ignore it when the laws are broken. So basically, focus on enforcing the laws. If you want more people in, then change the laws. Thank you.
you're very welcome, sir. Mr. Arnold, you're up first on this next question. What role, if any, should government play in regulating social media?
Well, I don't think it's unique to thing like physically or verbally on the people. The government's job is to run the entire country, and responsibilities of having a safe country. So the government should take any and all necessary actions to protect people from harm by social media. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. Siddiqi. Your thoughts?
Yes, so it's a multi-pronged question. I would say when usage of social media bleeds into criminality, for example. So doxing is a major issue that many community members are facing right now, where their personal information is being leaked out by bad faith actors. We experience this all the time in Washington State. Then the government necessarily doesn't need to have laws that are in place that holds accountable individuals who are engaging in defamatory or potentially life-threatening type of behaviors. So that's something that I would say impacts marginalized communities on a great level. However, secondarily, I've been also somebody who's been a great voice against mass surveillance and backdoors by government agencies for the purposes of spying on people's private information. So I do not believe that government agencies like the NSA and FBI should have blanket access to people's backdoors through Facebook, Instagram, and many of these other platforms. Furthermore, I do not believe TikTok should be banned. I know the incumbent in this race voted to ban TikTok. A lot of our youth are getting their information from this platform, and it's a very important platform for the younger generation. So government regulation when it comes to that should not be in place.
Thank you, sir. Another question about the role of government. Mr. Siddiqi, you lead off, please. What role, if any, should government play related to local journalism?
Local journalism, I don't believe that the government should play any type of role. I believe, freedom of speech is something that is encased by the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment. So, in terms of unless somebody is engaging in criminality, in the case of somebody engaging in harassment or doxing through these types of platforms, I don't really see necessarily where the government needs to play any type of role. So really, I think this is a question of like, are there bad faith actors within a certain industry who are meaning harm or potentially can harm other people through these factors. But as a blanket, I would say journalism does need to remain independent. Freedom of speech is one of the oldest encoded freedoms that we have in this country. So any type of restrictions on speech, whether in the school system and journalism, it opens up a very slippery slope, on how that would be interpreted. So definitely on the side of the First Amendment.
Thank you. Mr. Arnold, your thoughts about the role of government in local journalism?
Well, the same with social media, I think the government country, including journalism. Freedom of speech does not mean freedom to do harm. It's meant to prevent the exposure of fraud from being suppressed, in my opinion. So freedom of speech to the point that is necessary, but just printing anything just because you get access to the information should not automatically be allowed. So anything that could just be harmful for no purpose, the government does have to regulate that. Thank you. I lost you again.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Take the lead on this next question, again about government regulation. What role, if any, should government play in regulating artificial intelligence?
Well, the same as with the other two, but especially with artificial, make fraudulent videos about that. That just shows how the more technology we get, the more important it is for government to take an even leading role. So yes, government should take a very prominent lead role in regulating artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Mr. Siddiqui?
Yes, that is a tricky one. I mean, it's definitely a new frontier of information in the area of, like I said, I think the areas where it would be concerning would be the generation of images of individuals, that may be manipulated. And this really would play a major role in politics, I would say. Like you can basically create an AI image of anybody doing anything at this time. And so where exactly does that fall along the lines of defamation? Where does that fall along the lines of potentially deep fake videos, for example? Those are becoming more and more commonplace. So I would say the law enforcement agencies that exist have to, I think, adapt laws in order to make sure that individual privacy. So if something is being derived from my face or my family's face, and somebody's able to access my family pictures and essentially create some type of amalgamation, of Imran or his family in different poses, in ways that may not be flattering or to defame me. I would say that these types of laws, and US, I would say defamation laws do need to be strengthened much more given the fact that artificial intelligence is rising. So other European countries are taking the lead on that, but I would like to see them do much
Thank you,
better.
sir. Appreciate those thoughts. This one's for you first again, Mr. Siddiqui. What will you do, if anything, to support a vibrant economy in your district?
Yes, as a former small business owner, somebody who has been part of, the small business community, I would definitely be on the front lines of making sure that our small businesses in the area are definitely supported. Whatever I can do from a federal level to make sure that we bolster, diverse communities and organizations that are contributing to the economy are going to be paramount to me. In terms of I was also endorsed by the Urbanist as well, which is a great endorsement because I feel that we also need to focus on creating areas of sort of centralized living and playing sort of areas instead of a sprawling, huge, metroplex where it's going to be very dependent on a car-based economy. If we can continue to bolster newer developments with affordable housing, with business, with mixed use areas where people can play and work and live, I think this will also support a thriving economy in many of these areas as well. So I think that is the next evolution. Having access to mass transit is going to be extremely important as well. Try to get as many cars off the road as possible. Give people of all the areas of our region access to mass transit, I think, is going to be extremely helpful, and that will help bolster the economy on many levels.
Thank you for that. Mr. Arnold, your thoughts on how to support a vibrant economy in your district?
Again, I support supporting the living wage. We would like to get the Democratic administration supporting economic development across the country. We should continue that and increase it. We can't uh, we can't bring up every industry at the same time. They have to take their turns, but I support strongly federal funding to support businesses, local businesses, especially small business person, so they don't get pushed out by the super large corporations. Thank you.
You're welcome. And sir, if you would lead off on this next question, please tell us about your approach to passing legislation. What values are of greatest importance to you in working with other legislators? Please provide a brief example to illustrate your approach.
My okay. I think the question, part of it went up. I think the question was my main approach to passing legislation
Yes, sir.
is
Your
to
approach to
communicate with other people, with my other, yes, getting connection is getting worse. I'm sorry what you said at the end, but I would talk to the physician. One of my criticisms with their position and addressing repeatedly support my position and just be consistent in supporting the legislation I think is best for the country. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Siddiqi?
Yeah, can you repeat the questions for clarity?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Please tell us about your approach to passing legislation. What values are of greatest importance to you in working with other legislators? Please provide a brief example to illustrate this approach.
Yes, as a, former small business owner, my business was, in a very diverse area politically. You could call it Trump country in many respects. As somebody who works in civil rights and who has stood up for marginalized communities, on a surface level, you would say that I may not have anything to agree with maybe that customer base, but the way that I treat people with empathy and respect and, like with that level of service and personal concern is something that I've applied throughout my career, whether it's in the corporate world, whether it's in the business world and in my nonprofit world. And that I think worked a lot. That's why I think I had a lot of loyal customers during that time frame that continued to come, even though they knew that I worked maybe politically in a place that might be more diametrically opposed to them. So I think I can translate across political spectrums to try and work with people across the aisle. I come from a MBA background. I'm somebody who knows the issues. I know about business. I know about economics. So I'm not coming from a place of just, throwing stuff out there. I feel like I have like the expertise. I come from a place of empathy and I've worked intersectionally across diverse communities. And I think all of this experience, being part of these different organizations, standing up for all marginalized communities, but also being able to work across political spectrums is going to, I think, translate for me well.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate those thoughts. And now, again, your thoughts on your position on the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. Please explain.
Yes, I mean, voting rights are something that are extremely important to be encoded in this country. The fact that these voting rights were sort of stripped back a few years ago, I think, is a gross tragedy for this country. And we can see, especially in states that I've lived in previously, such as, where I grew up in Georgia, in places like Arizona, there's a concerted effort that are being made to try and limit polling places, limit access to ballot boxes. And these are all done with the concern of targeting Black and brown communities, poor communities. And so we have to do something on a federal level to make sure that these communities have federally encoded rights, where we're not limiting, turnout on election day, where we're not trying to create sort of a modern day poll tax on people who are trying to access the very fundamental right of voting. So I would support any type of legislation which expands voting rights for Americans, especially those in marginalized communities, especially those in poor communities, because these communities are underrepresented, far underrepresented in our democracy. Thankfully, in Washington, we have a great voting system by mail, but I'd like to see that expand, obviously, into other states as well.
Thank you. Mr. Arnold, your position on the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act?
Well, for voting rights in general, I think we should make sure everybody has the freedom to vote. We should send law enforcement that we can to protect them from going to the polls. But now with mail-in voting, we should concentrate more on mail-in voting. Make sure that election day is not the only day to vote, but it's just the last day. So get them the ballots in the mail early. They have plenty of time to fill them out and send them in. And then we'll also make sure that everybody has the right to run for office too, so that they're not intimidated. But the main thing, like with any law, is to make sure it is enforced. There's no point in having a law if you're not enforcing it. They have to be prosecuted, they have to be even criminally enforced. Violators should serve prison time. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. Arnold. And you get the first say on our very last question, and it is this. Please tell us something about your life experience that might surprise or intrigue voters.
Well, I suppose it's the fact that I'm running for office. Because I'm not not a spotlight type of person, but just our country is so important and is so under attack by persons who don't care about their neighbor, that just have to run for office to make sure everybody gets a first shake. And just the fact that I'm running for office, I think, is a big surprise to most people I know. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Mr. Siddiqi?
Yeah,
Yep. So with me, I would say I grew up around a small family business in Atlanta, Georgia. I was thrust into action when I was about 19 years old, when my older brother, who was the main provider for our family at the time, along with my father, who were running the family business, suffered a horrible accident, car accident, and had a traumatic brain injury. And he almost died in that accident. So that really put me in a position to where I had to step up to support my family. And so that sort of set the trajectory of my life, being somebody who steps up, meets the moment, meets the demands of the moment. And things come full circle where, in the absence of sort of my brother, thankfully he's alive and he's doing well, but I've also served as a mentor for his children. My campaign manager is actually my nephew, so his son, who was just born right before his accident. And so this is just sort of come full circle. Nephew actually runs the coffee shop in Arizona, is very inspired by my run for Congress, is a political science graduate, and came up here to help run the campaign. And so just it's just interesting to see how things come full circle, and now just trying to take things to the next step and make the family proud.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you. The League thanks both of these candidates for joining us and for running for office and for persisting through these technological challenges we had tonight. To let our listeners know, we asked Mr. Arnold to try turning off his camera so that the broadband he was using would maybe have an opportunity to
okay.
with his voice. And I hope it worked. Then you were able to hear what he had to say. Thanks so much for hanging in there with us, to both of you. A recording of this forum and others can be found on the League of Women Voters of Snohomish County website,
Thank you very
YouTube,
much.
podcast channels. You can find links at lwvsnoho.org. We encourage you to explore additional information about these and all candidates. Vote411.org, sponsored by the League, is another good source of information. The Snohomish County voter pamphlet was mailed starting July 17th. Watch for yours in the mail to arrive soon. Ballots will be mailed starting July 18th, and primary election day is Tuesday, August 6th. Please be a voter. Thank you to our League Candidate Forum team and to the Forum Coalition, and special thanks to Dave Moon and the Sultan High School students at TurkPride.tv who made this live stream possible. And of course, thank you to all of you for joining us. This concludes our Candidate Forum.